So I wanted to ask this question to all of you. I know it's an afternoon session. I know it's after a good lunch. So the question to all of you is, how is the Josh? I can't hear it. How is the Josh? Still can't hear it. How is the Josh? Good. So with that, and I know it is energetic, and I think as the other lady you spoke, the match is on. I'm requesting that if you want, our cricket match, which is the NGO World Cricket match, to go well and we to do well, I think this session is super duper important. So I'm requesting all of you to kindly pay attention as we really have eminent panelists with us. To set the context, me and my colleague were thinking that the session today is all about...
How's the George?
Oh. So I don't know what's wrong. I'm not an IT person. Maine bola na, how is the Josh? So today's session is, or the panel discussion is all about deepening impact and monitoring it. And me and my colleague were really discussing, it's a typical way of setting a context, okay? I speak something and the panel members speak something, and it was really our endeavor to see how we can do it differently. So what did we do? We looked out for cartoons. We looked out for cartoons in the impact space, in the deepening of impact space, to say, what are the cartoons trying to tell you? So I have the first cartoon with me. So what we did, we went around the corner, not to all of the members who are here, but to a lot of them to say, what does this picture mean? Yeah? These were some of the answers. This picture, to few of them, meant that identifying and involving the ones who need the most support is deepening, is for them deepening. Second important thing is programs that ensure sustained participation of beneficiaries. You have 100 people that is your target in the planning stage, and while you go down, on your project, you really find 20 people who have been really using that service. So that is what deepening meant to them. The third is really reaching to variety of needs of the poor. So that is what deepening really meant to them. I like this the most. And please tell me, whom did it come from? In God we trust, all others must bring data. Can you tell me who said that? It never came from HCL Foundation. No, but someone of them said that to me. It was their, we asked them what does monitoring mean? Oh, what does this mean? So a few people said mountains of data means हमने बहुत काम किया है, ऐसा लिखता है. For some, it meant data simplification. For some, they said that, okay, quantity is good, but quality assessment is important. For them, some people said data should really tell the story. And for many others, they also said कि उतना ही data मांगो जहां पे हम decision making कर सकते हैं. Don't ask for a lot of data. This is interesting. Someone sang a song. They really sang a song saying, development world hai suhana, yahan kal kya ho kisne jana. The development world is really challenging, is really dynamic. And what is the M&E going to do? The M&E is going to help us to make those decisions. So that is also someone else said that M&E is useful only if it is timely used so that you can course correct. Now, while the ambition of HCLF Foundation and its partners is really to deepen its impact and to monitor it, we really have with us a lot of eminent panelists with us, and I'm going to make sure that we get a lot of insights from them. So with that said, the structure of the session is going to be simple. I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to introduce my panel members. We'll have a question and answer session with them, and I'll leave the floor open to them, and then we'll wrap it up. So that it's as simple as that. So with that said, obviously I have not marked my introduction to the panelist. So I was really after the panel members in saying, yaar, mujhe itna lamba chauda, about your career mat batane do. Just tell me one thing that really speaks about you. While I'll give a formal introduction, but for me, Dr. Bhaskar Sinha came as a Baba of climate change. When I mean a Baba, he's a guru in the climate change space. So, but let me give a formal introduction to Dr. Bhaskar Sinha. He is really the Associate Professor and Chairperson of Center for Climate Change Studies at IIFM. And he has a PhD from JNU, and I'll soon do a PhD. And he also has a 15 years of work experience in research, consulting, and teaching. So welcome, Dr. Sinha. I have my dear friend, Parul. Parul and I go back many, many years. I think he is a person who stand very, very, what I would say, वो हिलते नहीं है जब तूफान आता है. So that is Parul Soni. He's a friend. He's always a guide to me. And I think one introduction for Parul is he really has worked across 54 countries and worked with several stakeholders, it may be a Fortune 500 company, or it can be an academic knowledge institutions or global alliances or industry associations. So that's Parul Soni. He doesn't need any more introduction. Finally, I have Professor Sarvana Jaikumar. I think he was here with us. Okay. So Sarvana is an assistant professor with Indian Institute of Management. He is a faculty with the marketing group at IIM-Calcutta. And during his tenure, he has developed and served as an incumbent director for analytics and digital marketing program for executive. And his research work is in the nexus of public diplomacy, development, and marketing. I never had one word to speak about him. I ask him a lot. But if you want to talk about yourself, one word, what that would be?
So the students usually call me Doctor of Social Media. So Doctor Social Media could be fun.
Thank you. How is the Josh? Kuch high nahi hai yaar. I'm asking the panelists, how is the Josh? हाँ, exactly. Good. So with that said, let me start the panel discussion. So thank you all for coming in. It's really a pleasure to connecting with all of you. I think a lot is really spoken about deepening impact. So this is a question for you, Parul, that what are some of the unspoken or hidden dimensions of deepening impacts? That's number one. And number two is, what are some of the trends that you are observing as far as program deepening is concerned?
Thanks, Nutan. I think we all come from the sector which is the not-for-profit sector or the civil society. There are different dimensions and different names to the sector. पहले तो बहुत confusion होता था. मैं थोड़ा English और हिंदी दोनों में बोलूँगा कि foundation है, trust है, society है, क्या है. पहले तो कई साल लगे हमको ये समझाने में कि वो एक ही चीज है. Trust है, society है, Section 8 है. तो foundation अगर बोलेंगे तो वो अलग नहीं है. Why I'm talking about? Because these are all complexities which we have created. If you look at the whole issue of M&E, M&E is not new. Monitoring evaluation क्या है? Input, output, throughput, results and impact. When you look at the whole, the continuum of this as such, we are putting an input. Input क्या है? Input is resources, input can be money, it can be all that. उसको measure करने के लिए, we have to measure, and we want to know, if you put sugar in water and you want to know that, there is enough water, all of us, if we are all cooks, we know how much sugar has to be put, we know how it will work, all that. In development programming also, there is this kind of complex, or you can say there are simple things which are there. The whole thing of how will the programs be monitored. When it comes to monitoring kya hai? It's a supervision to see that if we have put the input, is the results or the entire output coming or not. To measure that, there are different tools, and these tools can be scientific. There are, when we started our development, work, we had the entire thinking of log frame. To see log frame banana hai. तो हम कहते हैं log frame कैसे बनेगा? So first of all, stakeholder assessment करो. Stakeholder, do the entire mapping of stakeholders. Do a problem statement. do objective analysis, then plot it into a results framework. So that was the thinking, and still it was the thinking. The US perspective, because you come from a US organization, it was more on to say that, the log frame was turned differently. And these days, we are talking about the theory of change. Nothing is different. It's all the same. It's the same stakeholders, it's the same beneficiaries. It's the only thing is that things are changing, the perspectives are changing to see that everybody wants to see the change happening. So that change is then put into a very simple terminology to say M&E, or you can say the meal, which is monitoring, evaluation, and learning. So how do we learn from it? So these are basically all that. And your questions on, deepening, to say that, how this should be more put forward. What I need is, and that's my, recommendation to all the civil society organizations here, is that we have to involve the real beneficiaries. For example, in schools, because these are examples I want to give. In schools, you have the PTA, which is the Parents Teacher Association. So with Save the Children, when my stint with Save the Children, we tried and we started working on Parent Teacher Students Association. Why did we do that? What was the need for students to be in that? Because we wanted the stakeholders. We are working for the students. We are working for the children. They should tell us, give us feedback. And that is the feed-forward feedback mechanism, is what is evaluation is all about. So I'll stop here. But what is important here is stakeholders are really, really important when it comes to deepening of the entire impact or deepening of the M&E part of it. And what are the trends? The trends are definitely government on CSR is mandated that we have to do an impact assessment. Anything more than 1 crore or upwards, we have to show that what kind of work we have done. And there is also third parties like us who are doing this kind of work. And this is how things are. But if we have to go a bit, in terms of deeper again on the entire thinking of trends, there is also possibility that, we are doing a lot of work which is more on video recording, so to see how these beneficiaries are getting the benefit of it. Or there are also very transparent ways to look at that. So there is all the M&E and the entire thinking of it is all we have to bring in the whole transparency that the money and the resources which we are putting in are judiciously and efficiently used for the benefit of the target group which the money or the resources have come from. It's very simple. So that's what my question is, and we can talk about it later and people can ask questions on that. Yeah.
Thanks, Parul. I would just add one thing to it, and this really came as an exercise when we were doing things, that nowadays I think Santosh spoke about linkage of sustainable, ESG and social sector. I would say a lot of investors out there are really looking for real impacts, and when they say real impacts, a lot of greenwashing is happening. Therefore, the trend which is really shaping up is how do you have really evidence to say your story? So that's what you talk about, transparency and evidence. Moving on, and this is a question for Professor Bhaskar, is why is impact monitoring becoming super important? Also, can you highlight some key trends only on the monitoring side?
Thank you. I think a lot have been talked more or less on this. Just to re-emphasize, I think the first word in management which we teach to our student, that anything which you can't measure, you can't manage. So therefore, if we are saying that we are managing anything, be it with natural resources, be it with assets, be it with money, we need to measure it how we are doing it. So that is the first thing. So from there it comes the entire thing that what is monitoring, what is evaluation. So monitoring, we also do self-monitoring. The way we use our resources, and why it is important when we are talking of monitoring and evaluation, that when we are talking of the monitoring, it is for the self, more for the self-organization, self-learning. When we are talking of the evaluation, it is more to do with also the impact part. That what my effort, what my action, what my management is making that impact. So both are interrelated. At the same time, why it is important to answer that question, you will first, which you do through monitoring and evaluation, that you increase the accountability of the stakeholders, all the stakeholders. Stakeholders here, the donors also, people who are funding, they're also accountable, they're also responsible that if they are funding for a purpose of enhancing the livelihood opportunity or enhancing the education penetration of the slums. So they also need to see at the end what impact they have done. So first thing is that we are also measuring accountability, and when we define all this monitoring and evaluation framework right from very beginning, then we are also increasing the transparency. Transparency is important also right from the inception and also the way you are implementing. So all the processes are defined. And we are saying that, it is, when I say that it is for the self-learning, that the next thing is also that all what we monitor the program, all what we evaluate the program, how much of that monitoring evaluation gets into the feedback, into the loop for improving our own implementation. So if you have a very robust and very scientific monitoring and evaluation mechanism, then probably you could also have a very strong and efficient implementation mechanism and also very strong impact. So I think transparency, accountability, efficiency, and also for the, if organization has to grow, like in the morning session I was sitting, I just joined today, I think there was a big discussion on this, how you manage the finances from the HCL team. I think they went on to explain for more than an hour and so. So why this is happening? This is also happening because for organization also they are evolving. Things keep changing. The way you used to manage finances, the way you used to manage a portfolio on health, the way you used to manage a portfolio on environment, the way you used to manage a portfolio on, dairy, things have changed. Things have changed a lot. So therefore, if you have a consistent record of all this monitoring evaluation right from very beginning for all the stakeholders, I think it is, a wealth of informations which goes, to make programs very effective, to make the impact very robust, and also to make the impact very sustainable. That's very, very important. And the next question, which I was saying that the key emerging trends, I think if you see, if you look at any UN agencies or a small NGOs or for that matter HCL also, you'll find that everyone they are talking of aligning with the SDGs goals, Millennium Development Goals. So if you look at even at the UN level, when Millennium Development Goals they all started with fixed target, defined target, that we will reduce the poverty by half by this date. We will reduce the, child mortality by half by this date. Okay, so, and then we are saying that it is all developmental goals. So I think the key trend is that all what you're doing, your objective, somewhere or others, it is leading to fulfillment of the larger goals of the country, of the organization, of the state, and also of the global. Because nowadays, I come from a background with the climate change. So if you talk of climate change, it is a global problem until unless every country, every individual contribute to it. No matter whatever one country, one individual does, it has no meaning. So therefore, all these actions, all those programs has to be programmed in such a manner that it is linked to your NDCs, that is national goals, SDGs, state goals, state development goals, also UN goals and other things. And you will find that all these programs at the state level, national levels, UN levels, every programs, they have a constant and they have a very dynamic feedback wherein you get an update that what is happening in this sector, which country, which state. So I think that becomes very, very important. And I think all what you do as a foundation like HCL, it does, I think there were like more than 200 NGOs working with HCLs on different verticals. So I think for an organization like HCL, it becomes very important to have a very creative and dynamic dashboard wherein, all those indicators of monitoring and evaluations of different sectors are well spelled out. And that is a dynamic world where the organization can see, the partners can see, and they also can learn from each other. So I think that is the, global trend. And with the use of technology, with the use of data science, with the use of analytics, this has become more and more powerful. Whatever answer you want, immediately you will get it. So, I mean, your knowledge, your monitoring, your evaluation, your data also has to be organized in such a manner that whoever is seeking an information based on his or her question, he should be able to make a query and get an answer, so that at every scale, at every level, and people have satisfactory answers based on your monitoring and evaluations, and they can contribute wherever, wherever, and whatever they want to do. Okay, so I'll stop here, and then maybe later we can.
Thank you, Professor Bhaskar. Professor Sarvana, what are the key principles for impact measurement that a foundation should consider?
That's an interesting question. So I think a part of it was covered by Parul and Dr. Bhaskar as well. So I wouldn't cover the same things that they actually spoke about, but let me take a different perspective on the same thing, right? So when we think about impact, it's very easy for us to get lost in the details, and it sounds very simple, measure impact of whatever something that you're doing. But all of us present here, not just in the panel, even the audience, that, it's not that simple a task. Right? Measuring impact is not as simple as it sounds, right? So because there are a lot of complexities, there are a lot of different things that can come in your way, and which can actually hamper the entire process. So certain things that you can keep in mind. So let me talk about a few examples that we've actually done in the past, and we'll talk about certain concepts as well based on that. Right. So, for instance, we've done a lot of programs. One of the programs, I think even some of the partners are also running similar programs where you do literacy projects, right? So where you're actually focusing on educating people, consumer literacy and entrepreneurship literacy and so on, right? So it's very easy for us to get lost in the details and say, you know what, last year we did a literacy program for 500 people. We have reached our target, right? But that was not the higher objective. The higher objective was, to give education to these people and then make sure that they, start some economic activity or they change their behavior in certain way, right? And then that results in some sort of a financial or economic well-being, right? So the higher impact should be measuring the change in their behavior. So what we end up doing is we look at our baseline. So as NGOs, we look at our baseline and say we started at, 0. Now we have 1,000 literacy programs that we have done. But the end line and the baseline should be from the beneficiary's perspective, right? Where did they start? At the end of the program, where did they end up, right? So that will be the higher impact and a deeper impact, right? So for instance, in the literacy projects, we not only tracked how many people we actually gave education to, but we also went back to them and said, did they actually change their behavior? When they go to the shop, do they actually negotiate better? Do they store low cost items a lot more, right? So that's the real impact, right? So right from the beginning, even before the project starts, you should have a very clear higher level objective, right? So this is a broader objective, and these are all the milestones that we are going to reach, and the metrics that we track is actually the process, right? But the higher level objective should always be in your mind when you're thinking about the impact, right? So another project that we ran was, distributing mobile phones to smartphones to rural women in the rural areas and disadvantaged locations. So it's very easy to say that, we distributed 2,000 mobile phones and then we are done. So that's the impact. But that's not the real impact, right? So the idea was to give them the smartphones, empower them, and ask them to, communicate with each other and engage in some sort of a purposeful communication. If you actually give them the smartphones and say, my job is done, they're actually going to use it for, just looking at videos or it's not purposeful usage. Then we actually went further and said, we are going to actually teach them how to use the mobile phone in a purposeful manner. They actually can communicate with everybody else, can learn certain crafts and activities, can learn stitching, for instance, right? And provide some stitching services to everybody around. Then you actually measure the impact. The impact is more in terms of how they are using their idle time. Are they actually using the mobiles in a purposeful manner, right? So a lot of time in terms of, when we think about audit, when we think about complaint, complaints metrics and so on, we just focus on how much have we distributed, how many programs have we done, what are the metrics in terms of number of people who actually reached out to. That was your baseline and your end line. But your actual baseline and end line should be where did the beneficiaries start and where did they actually end up, right? So that should be the primary driving principle, right, of measuring impact. When you take that route, it automatically becomes, the impact also becomes a lot more deeper, right? And some of the key things to keep in mind is even before the project starts, you should know clearly what to measure, right? The higher objective, what exactly you're going to measure. So you're going to measure before the program starts, and you're also actually going to measure after the program ends as well. So, or you need to have periodic measurements as well. So you have a pre and post measurement. So you can compare and say, this is where the beneficiary started. This is where they actually ended up being. This is how we are contributing to the overall sustainability goals, right? Rather than just mentioning that, we distributed 10,000 smartphones, right? So what is the use of that? What is the end impact of that particular, distribution? That has to be very, very clear, right? Another aspect to keep in mind when you're thinking about measuring impact is, so we've distributed the phones. So what, right? So what if people who don't have their telephones, who don't have a smartphones, also can actually become in the same manner in the same time period? So certain other things to keep in mind is, what the baseline could be a different group of people as well. So as academics, what we do is whenever we go into the field, we think of, two different groups. One is a baseline, another one is a treatment group. In the treatment group, we distribute the smartphones and we see how their life is changing compared to the baseline groups, how their lives are actually changing. Right? So when you're able to compare and contrast and say, in this time period, in the last 2 years, right, this is how this lives of these people have changed, whereas in the control group where we have not given the smartphones, right, their lives have actually gone from, point A to point B, whereas the improvement in the other group is actually quite high. This kind of gives you a very, very, objective metric of how the beneficiary's life actually changed. The other thing that we also do is, we don't leave the control group hanging, because after the program is done, it's unethical to actually have a control group and not give them the smartphones. We end up giving them the smartphones as well. We end up actually, whatever we learn from the other group, we are going to actually impart to that as well, impart to that group as well, right? So these are certain concepts, but there is a lot more to actually measuring impact. But the overall thing to keep in mind is the broader level objective, what is the higher objective, and what are you actually measuring from the beneficiary's side, right? That's what I would say, some of the key principles to keep in mind when you're thinking about measuring impact. Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you, Sarvana. I have a question which is really complex. In any developmental project, it's not just one organization who is supporting a project. You will have multiple partners, maybe it government or other donor agencies who is working in the same area and working with the same objective. So this is a question for you, Professor Bhaskar, that how do you do attribution of the impact when there are multiple stakeholders involved, and how do you say that this agency's impact is so much?
Thank you. I think that's a very pertinent question. See, I think the first part we are trying to say that why this is important, and one of the important reason why monitoring evaluation is important, that we should be able to improve the efficiency of implementation and increase the impact. So if we were to do so, how do we do that? Let's say we are implementing 10 different things. Out of 10 different things, maybe 5 things will have impact or will have profound impact. Maybe 5 would be redundant. We need to identify those 5 which works, those 5 which doesn't work. And it's not one fit for all. So attribution becomes very, very important. I think if you look at the recent literature and this World Bank team and other things, they are saying that, all this theory of change and other things, the new word which we are saying, that input, throughput, output, that defines theory of change. But I think what is important that at one given point of time, in one particular place or in one particular sector, it is not that it is only one organization which is bringing the change. Okay, let's say if, you bring some interventions in a particular village A, that is specific, but apart from that, over and above, there are already government machineries and other machineries which are working on the overall development for that particular village. Okay, so maybe one could say that, whether it is your contribution or government programs contributions. So that is the question which you are trying to ask. And I think that is something which we need to be very clear, so that we can increase our role in terms of bringing that super change which we were talking of. So let's say, I'll just explain with example. I'm sure that many of you would be very familiar with this literature. In the World Bank, they are calling that double difference methods or difference in difference method. So let's say, you are doing something. Let's say you are distributing drought resistant seeds to the farmers. Okay, and let's say a village has 100 households. Only 50 households, they have accepted or they have adopted your drought resistant seeds, whereas 50 have not. Okay. Now, if you were to do this impact evaluations after that session, then maybe, the yield of that particular farmer who has adopted your seeds has gone from 5 to 10, and maybe from others, like if you're looking at the end line, then from others it is let's say 6 only. So you are saying 10 minus 6, 4 is the attribution. That is wrong. So if you were to actually attribute that, what is your attribution, what is your causal relationship, in that case you will have to have, case control and pre and post. So you have a sample, let's say, I have adopted your technology, okay, and then my yield has increased from 5 to 10. He has not adopted your technology. his yield has also increased from 5 to 7 because of good weather and good favorable conditions. Okay, so even if you would have not given me this seed, still my yield would have gone to 7. So actual attribution of your program, it is only 10 minus 7, that is 3, not 10 minus 5. Okay, so similarly, I mean, there would be many. So I think this becomes in a typical, as you said that rightly, that in any sector or in any particular region, there are n number of multiple partners who are working on different aspects. And this all will have lots of synergistic effect. So I think the first and foremost thing that we divide all those indicators in two parts. One, we say at the process indicators, that I mean, these are the list of activities which you are doing. And then you are saying that, okay, you have, I mean, worked on making carbon smart, you have worked on water smart, you have made them knowledge smart, you have made them energy smart. Okay, let's 4 or 5 different interventions. So these are the different interventions. So, and then you are saying that, okay, you have performed these activities. So on the process part, you have done it well. You have worked on all the 4 aspects. But when it comes to impact, then I need to see that what has been the change in terms of the water usage by the people. I need to see that what has been the change in terms of carbon reductions, I mean, based on the interventions which you have made. Okay, so that's a real impact. I mean, if you are saying that you are making overall development, what is the total impact in the total, I mean, economic or the livelihood? So those are the real impact. So, I mean, I think it is very important, and I think nowadays any proposal which even government they are asking, they are also asking that you have to define set of indicators and the process indicators and also your outcome indicators or impact indicators. Therefore, I mean, from day one, you know very clearly that how you are going to implement, while you are going to be measured by the implementation, and you are also going to be measured for your impact. So I think those two things have to be differentiated from different programs. And it is only then you know that what is the actual, contribution of that particular programs. Otherwise, your program will, go haywire. You will spend money, but it will not have impact. I'll give you another example. There was one study which I studied somewhere in some parts of Africa. Entire region was hit with cholera. So they thought that this is because of the water. So they said that, okay, how many 1,000 households? So we'll give 1,000 water purification. What is that? Water purification system. They installed all that. After 1 year, the cholera patient was still rising. Okay. Then they realized that, okay, if you are giving them water purification system, but if they don't have electricity, for them it is of no use. Right? So ultimately, after the second round, they thought that, okay, if we were to, get rid of this cholera, then they distributed all these pills, the chlorine pills, that they can use it very well. Even that did not bring. So they thought that the only way you have to treat the source. So the only source from which they get this water was well and ponds. They said that, okay, instead of doing this each household and other things, change their habit, it is better that we keep and we sanitize and we treat the entire well, the entire source itself, and the cholera came down. So if you have such target-driven approach for your impact evaluations and the process evaluations, then your interventions, even 5 penny can bring difference of, $50, or otherwise even $50 cannot bring the impact of 5 penny. So that is the thing. So those difference, I think we as a professional, we need to know right from very beginning, what are we spending on, where are we spending, how are we spending, and for that I think effective monitoring and evaluation mechanism has to be in place right from very beginning. Thank you.
Sarvana, this is for you. When he talked about the effective monitoring, technology age is there, and what can you talk about technology use both in the deepening aspect as well as the monitoring aspect?
Yeah, definitely. Right. So I think some of the aspects were already covered by Dr. Bhaskar in terms of analytics and the use of data and so on. But when we talk about technology, I think sometimes we have a huge misunderstanding. We start with technology and then we go into, deploying projects. It should be the other way around. You're starting with an objective. You have a very clear objective. You have a baseline. You have an end line. You have a particular process and outcome. Then you figure out how technology can actually make it a lot more easier and simpler, right? How can actually technology enhance all this entire process and make it much more efficient? So that is the way one should, I would say ideally, it's not the right word, but yeah, one should ideally look at technology. But yeah, now that we have a lot of access to, even in the rural areas, people have access to smartphones, people have access to internet and so on. It makes it a lot more easier to figure out, measure impact using technology, right? So simple metrics like, what is the usage of internet on a daily basis, on what did they actually use on, what did they actually learn on a daily basis. These things we were not able to track in the earlier stages, but now we can actually track it with the consent of the participants, of course, right? And technology has made it much more easier for us to evaluate impact as well. So in the same example that I mentioned, where we are providing them literacy